the Dirty Reds. We will attack, defend, attack. We've been away so long, we grew hungry, we grew strong. Now we're back where we belong. We are the Dirty Reds and we love to win. And every time we play, you'll hear our Dirty Red fans cheer. Hey! Don't think we'll go away, 'cause the Dirty Reds are here to stay.
Well, the Glebe Dirty Reds were the first team in Australian Rugby League, formed back on the 9th of January 1908. They had a pretty successful 22-year stint in the New South Wales Rugby League first grade premiership. They won 55% of their games, which to this date I think is still the 5th best record of any club. And most of those games won here at Wentworth Park as well. A lot of history here. They dropped out of the competition at the end of 1929 and they were inactive for the better part of the next 87 years. But still the fabric of the game is built into this area, as we're seeing today with a great crowd here at Wentworth Park. Revival of the team was a pretty long process. It came about as a result of a couple of beers between good mates, and obviously Max Solling, the local Glebe historian who'd written the history of the Dirty Reds, gave us the inspiration, and we were fans of Newtown and North Sydney in the New South Wales Cup, and we thought, well, why couldn't we try and make it happen for Glebe as well? Over the course of the next 12 months, we found some sponsors. We got talking to the Concord Burwood team, who were already in Ron Massey and running a fantastic football program, but financially had a few issues, and it really has been the perfect marriage between the two clubs. Oh, look, I have never lived in Glebe. My only involvement here is through people like Max Solling and John Gray, who's descendant of the famous Gray family who played for Glebe, and I suppose now we feel like we're part of the community.
Oh, my name's Max Solling. I wrote a book on the Glebe Rugby League Club. Glebe in 1908 was a social mosaic of middle class, lower middle class and working class districts. And rugby league in Glebe got their great strength largely from the working class areas. Within the first 5 weeks of January 1908, 5 clubs were formed, and Glebe was the first on the 9th of January 1908. It was formed upstairs of Glebe Town Hall, and it was covered in great detail in the papers at the time because it was the first club. Hoyle, who was the president, spelt out what the objects of the league were. It was primarily about payment and giving them a fair go, which players under the Metropolitan Rugby Union clearly weren't given. It was called a football club, but it was much more than that. It was very much a social institution. They had regular social functions, but more importantly, if anyone was either very sick or had died, they would have some form of social activity to raise money for, whether it was for the funeral or for the widow. It definitely had a soul. Glebe was unceremoniously dumped from the competition in 1929. The reasons were given that it was a suburb of declining population, industrialisation and other facts that held no water whatsoever. The real reason was Balmain had been a very successful club up to 1924, and they'd had very little success then. 2 of their members, particularly Bob Savage, decided that they'd like to take Glebe's territory. He put up these reasons why, in fact, Glebe should be eliminated from the competition. And that's what happened. Many Glebe spectators turned their back on the game of that. There was all sorts of hard things said about the rugby league and how good Glebe should be restored, but they never were. It clearly was an act of bastardry and couldn't be interpreted any other way.
It was probably a dream. It was together at the pub with a group of mates, going through the history of the game and the rivalry with Glebe and Newtown Jets on who was actually the first club. We thought, well, we can actually revive Glebe Rugby League. Wouldn't that be great? Which led into actually us getting some sponsors, speaking to Concord Burwood and really initiating the start of Glebe Rugby League back, yeah. Darren's a good operator and the dream turned into reality, which is fantastic. We've been best mates since kindergarten. So yeah, we've played footy together, we've watched it together, and now we're running a club together, which is fantastic.
So my name's Nike Aaron Zammit. Been the head coach of Glebe Burwood now for about 6 years. Been playing pretty much my whole life. Got injured when I was around 20, and then I got into coaching. Was coaching my own age group, and then from then it's pretty much been football ever since, really. The Ron Massey is a third-tier competition. We're in the Cronulla system, so it's basically from Cronulla feed down to Newtown Jets, and Newtown Jets now feed down to Glebe Burwood. So the level of competition, it's pretty high standard. Even this year with being with Newtown and training together, just the drills that they do and the way that the coach talks to the players, I've sort of been able to, take notes and hopefully mimic that with my own team so that we can become more professional. It's probably a little bit tougher without a leagues club backing. We're like basically a smaller club that we're the battlers. We're just trying to do the best we can with what resources we have. But to be honest, when we had our first meeting with Glebe, well, when the meeting was organised, the first thing I did was hit Google and Google Glebe Dirty Reds. Even though I've loved football my whole life, I actually never really knew about them. When I found out and did my Wikipedia searches and such, I worked out who they were and what they did, and yeah, it was really interesting. The challenge of coaching, it's been, I wouldn't say it's been more difficult, but it's a little bit of added pressure now that we've got the history of Glebe involved with our club. It's a bit of an honour to sort of be representing a club now that's been alive since the beginning.
My name's Jackson Garlick. I've been with the Concord Burwood Wolves for 5 years this year. When Glebe came on board a year ago, we didn't know much about it, and so I was quite surprised to hear that they were a foundation club. I was born in 1993 and we heard about all the clubs that folded, with the Super League when they came in. But unfortunately for the Dirty Reds, you don't hear about it. Since Darren has really been at training sessions and pushing it, but we've been able to develop a bit of a fan base in the last year. Just, as you can see by the crowd today, that there's a bit of a following for a foundation club. To run out on the field, I got goosebumps in the Dirty Red jersey. When you put on a jersey, obviously you've got to buy into the culture that club has, and for this club to be a foundation, back when you had the Burge brothers playing, it gives you goosebumps. To put on that jersey, it gives you just that extra bit of oomph that you need to play, and I think it's great when you have fans here that are so supportive as well.
My name's John Gray. My dad Tom played for the Dirty Reds. In 26 he was the reserve grade captain, but he played with his 3 other brothers, Bert, Frank and Paddy Gray. And they're known as the Gray brothers, and they're quite involved with the club over the years. I met Darren and thought, nice, bright, hard-working fella. Not sure he's going to pull this off with the league and the way things were. Went with him out to see Dave Trodden, who was the CEO of the rugby league at that stage. Dave played a nice diplomatic game, but it was pretty clear to me that Dave wasn't having any new club entering which hadn't been thoroughly tested out. And Darren, to give him his due, decided that they'd do it the hard way, and they did. They did it the hard way. Look, I was very excited that they were back in. I've been very excited that Darren got it that far. But going out that day was a very proud day because it was good to see them. It was good to go to Leichhardt Oval because it's a lovely suburban ground, despite who owns it. It was good to be there to watch them play, to come see them out in their jerseys. But you're talking about emotion more than anything else. I was very happy to have my little Chris McKivat shirt on with the Dirty Reds and to cheer them on. I was very pleased to hear the last time we played West they beat us, but we beat them today, and the last time we played West was in 1928. So look, it was a wonderful day.
Well, Wentworth Park was one of 2 venues that hosted the very first club rugby league games in Australia, of course here in Birchgrove Oval being the other venue. So it's got a very special place in the history of the game. It was also Glebe's home ground for 22 years, or the better part thereof, and they had a lot of wins here, a lot of blood spilled out here, and from all reports the fans were more parochial than at any other ground in rugby league.
Absolutely essential to go to Wentworth Park. Whilst Wentworth Park is an opportunity, if ever it gets closed down, of course, then there's nowhere they can go. It talks to the history of Glebe, it talks to the community of Glebe. There are folk songs to be sung about people chasing referees up St John's Road from Wentworth Park.
It's a local feel, The sort of thing that Glebe played was intensely local. That's where they played, that was the home ground. And that's where the Glebe spectators went to expect them to commit ritual slaughter on the visiting team. And they usually did at Wentworth Park, even when they were struggling near the end. But for most of the time, Glebe from 1908 till 22 was a very strong team. They were always up the top. The Glebe fans were known for being particularly rabid. One of the most outrageous ones was the Glebe was playing North Sydney at Wentworth Park. Tommy Gleeson, who was a great centre, was kicked in the head by a North Sydney forward. Sammy Griffiths, who was playing for Glebe, he pursued the North Sydney player off the field. The Glebe spectators thought it was time they took control, so they started ripping palings off the fence and coming over the fence after the North Sydney players.
Look, it's been 2 years of negotiations to get access to Wentworth Park. The venue is obviously the Greyhound facility for the Sydney metropolitan area. It also is the home ground for a couple of Balmain soccer clubs. So it's been very difficult for us to get access. The management of Wentworth Park have been fantastic about making today happen.
Oh, it's a great relief, to tell you the truth. A lot of work went into today, specifically getting Wentworth Park to actually play a football game here. It's been 88 years. It's been a long time coming.
Well, you look around, you see all the heritage buildings that are here, and obviously being in the centre of Sydney is such a historic ground. You can see some of the facilities have been around here for a long time. Yeah, I think it's a massive credit to all the people that are behind the reinstatement of this club in general. To get back in the Ron Massey Cup, which is quite a premier competition. I do feel like there's such a love for the club and a love for the history of NRL to get that back. For all being volunteers. I think it's a mammoth task to get where we are today. I've had such a little role in just being a player with the club. It makes me proud to see a foundation club come back into a comp.
I bring up a lot of the past to all the players. The fact that it is such an old club, walking in and seeing a big crowd as there is today, it was a little bit of added pressure. It's just an honour to sort of represent them and know that we're sort of part of something that's been around from the beginning.
Being, I suppose, the home of rugby league, the goal is to play a lot more games here. And I think today showcased how well it can work, which is fantastic. And so the goal is to really have this as maybe a home ground or a lot more games played here in the future. Now we're at the end of the game. It's looking around. It's fantastic. It's sort of a lot of emotion let down, which is great.
Look, we're really pleased with the turnout. We were hoping to get a couple of hundred people through the gate, and we've exceeded those expectations. So it's been a really positive event for us. It's a very special place. It's important that Rugby League remembers Wentworth Park and the role that it plays, and today's game is all about trying to ensure that that happens. We hope that this is the first of many visits back here, but it's certainly been a very exhausting couple of months for everyone involved with the club. The big objective for the club this year is to relaunch its junior program. There hasn't been junior clubs in Glebe for a number of years, so that's our number one priority. We've got some pretty lofty ambitions, and we'll take it one day at a time, but hopefully we'll be seeing more teams running around sooner rather than later under the Glebe Dirty Reds banner.
I just see it growing strength to strength, really cementing in Ron Massey Cup, and it's a club for the suburb.
Bert Gray was given an award from the club because he was involved in their team of the century. Bert, of course, was a great footballer, and his son Vince is much older than I, and there were tears in the man's eyes. I'm getting almost emotional. Think about it. When the prize was given to him, he looked at it as if, or like you might look at a newborn baby, and he gazed at it with some great joy. And just the glimmer of a glint from his left eye gave out a bit of a small tear, I suspect. So it was a deeply felt thing from him.
In writing the book, the thing that most interested me, how it left a lasting impression on people who lived here. And I suspect it really was very much embedded in the working class culture of the time. Because they all stuck together, money wasn't a resource, their strength was playing for the club. If you were good enough to play first grade for team, it gave them self-esteem that sustained them through their lives, and that was terribly important to them.
I knew it was going to be a lot of work. I didn't quite realise quite how much went into to running a football club, but look, we've got a lot of help, both at Glebe Dirty Reds level, but also from Concord Burwood. It's been challenging at times, particularly in the last few weeks. It's almost the start of the season, but look, at the end of the day, it all came off, so it's been worth it.
We are the Dirty Reds, and we're back. We are the Dirty Reds, we will attack, defend, attack. We've been away so long, we grew hungry, we grew strong. Now we're back where we belong. We are the Dirty Reds, and we love to win. And every time we play, you'll hear our Dirty Red fans cheer. Hey! Don't think we'll go away, 'cause the Dirty Reds are here to stay. We are the Dirty Reds of Glebe, we have the longest history. We are the Dirty Reds and we're back.